The rehabilitation floor at the VA center overlooked the whole city, all glass and quiet light, the kind of view most people would call beautiful. Master Chief Wesley Grant had stopped noticing it weeks ago. He sat by the window most mornings, wheelchair angled just enough to see the skyline without having to look at it directly. The staff had learned not to bother him before 9. Not out of neglect. Out of a kind of tired respect that comes when a strong man goes quiet, and no one quite knows the right thing to say. Wesley had been the kind of soldier other soldiers talked about in careful, admiring tones. 14 years in. 3 deployments nobody outside a small circle would ever hear the details of. A spinal injury from the last one had ended all of that in a single afternoon, and no surgery since had given him back what the blast took. He wasn't unkind to the staff. He simply didn't expect much from this place. Rehabilitation centers, in his experience, were full of people reading from binders. Encouraging words that all sounded the same after a while. Dr. Alan Whitfield ran the program with brisk efficiency, arms crossed, always a step removed. Competent. Distant. The kind of doctor who managed a floor rather than a person. Then there was Nurse Claire Dawson. She'd started 3 weeks earlier, and Wesley had clocked her the way he clocked everyone now, quickly, quietly, filing her away as one more well-meaning stranger who'd eventually run out of patience with him, same as the others. He was wrong about that, though he didn't know it yet. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the sky outside doing that slow amber fade it does over the city in early autumn. Claire was reviewing his chart at the nurse's station when she noticed something, a small detail buried in his file that most people would have skimmed right past. A unit designation. A deployment date. A call sign, listed almost as an afterthought under his service record. Ghost Actual. Claire had grown up the daughter of a Navy corpsman, a man who still, 20 years after his own service, sometimes said things in his sleep that made her mother gently close the bedroom door. She knew what a call sign meant to the men who'd carried one. Not just a name. An identity. A piece of who they'd been before the injury, before the wheelchair, before all of it got reduced to a diagnosis on a clipboard. She found him by the window that evening, right where he always was. Ghost Actual, she said quietly, not as a question. Just a fact, offered gently, the way you'd hand someone something they'd dropped. Wesley turned his head slowly. It had been a long time since anyone outside his old unit had said those words to him. "Where'd you hear that?" he said. Not sharp. Just tired. "Your file," Claire said. "My dad was a corpsman. 2 tours. I grew up around men who used to be called things like that, before they came home and just got called, sir, or Mr., or, worse, patient." Something in Wesley's shoulders loosened, just slightly. Not relief exactly. Recognition. "Nobody's called me that in 3 years, he admitted. "Would you like me to stop?" He considered it for a long moment, looking back out at the skyline. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I would." It wasn't a single conversation that changed things. It was many small ones, spread across weeks, the way real trust usually builds, slowly, without ceremony. Claire didn't push him through his exercises with the practiced cheerfulness some of the other staff used, the kind of encouragement that can feel, to someone in Wesley's position, like being talked to instead of talked with. She asked him questions instead. About his unit. About the men he'd served with. About what he missed, and what, if he was honest, he didn't miss at all. "I miss the weight of it," he told her one afternoon, working through a set of resistance exercises Dr. Whitfield had prescribed. "Not the danger. The weight. Gear on your back, knowing exactly what your job is. Now I don't know what my job is anymore." Claire didn't rush to fix that for him. She simply said, "Maybe your job right now is just this. Getting your body to listen to you again. That's not smaller work. It's just different work." He'd looked at her for a long moment after that, the way a man looks at someone who said something true without trying to be profound about it. Dr. Whitfield noticed the change before he understood it. Wesley started arriving early to sessions instead of needing to be reminded. He began pushing through repetitions he'd have refused a month earlier. Small things. A grip strengthening. A flicker of sensation returning in his left leg that no one had expected this early. "Whatever you're doing," Whitfield told Claire one evening, arms still crossed but his voice softer than usual, "keep doing it." "I'm not doing anything special," Claire said. "I'm just letting him be who he still is, instead of only what happened to him." There is a particular kind of loneliness that settles into people who've spent their lives being the strong one, the one others lean on, the one who runs toward danger instead of away from it. When that role is suddenly taken by injury, the silence that follows can feel heavier than the injury itself. Wesley had spent 2 years assuming that silence was simply what remained of him now. A man in a chair by a window, waiting for a life that wasn't coming back. Claire didn't try to talk him out of his grief. She'd learned, from watching her own father over the years, that grief for an old identity doesn't respond well to cheerful reassurance. It responds to patience. To being seen clearly, without flinching, by someone willing to sit with the whole truth of it. "You're allowed to miss who you were," she told him one evening, when the physical therapy was done and they were simply talking, the city lights beginning to flicker on below them like something being lit gently, one window at a time. "That doesn't mean you're not still becoming someone. It just means the becoming looks different than you expected." Wesley looked out at the skyline, quiet for a long moment. "My daughter's 12, he said eventually. She used to tell people her dad was a superhero. Now I don't know what she tells people." "Maybe," Claire said gently, "she tells them her dad is the strongest man she knows. Because from what I've seen these last few weeks, that's still true. It just looks different than throwing gear on your back." Something shifted in his face then, not dramatic, not sudden, but real. The particular unclenching of a man who has been braced against something for a very long time, finally allowing himself to set part of it down. Progress, when it came, arrived quietly, the way most real progress does. Not in a single triumphant moment, but in 100 small Tuesdays that slowly added up into something like hope. 6 months in, Wesley took his first unassisted steps between 2 parallel bars, legs trembling with effort, sweat at his temples, Dr. Whitfield watching with quiet professional pride and Claire standing close enough to catch him, though she didn't need to. He made it the full length of the bars. 8 steps. It wasn't much, by most measures. By his measure, it was everything. Afterward, breathing hard, gripping the bars for support, he looked over at Claire with something in his eyes that hadn't been there when she'd first met him by that window. "Ghost actual," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Guess he's still in here somewhere." "He never left," Claire said. "He just needed someone to remember his name." There's a particular kind of wisdom that comes only from years lived carefully, the understanding that people are rarely only what happened to them. That the roles we carry, whether soldier or nurse or father or something else entirely, live alongside us rather than defining the whole of us. Wesley Grant would never fully return to the man he'd been before that afternoon overseas. Nobody does, not really, not after something that changes the body so completely. But he was learning, slowly, in the quiet company of a nurse who'd simply refused to let him disappear into his diagnosis, that a life could still hold meaning even when it looked entirely different than the one he'd planned. Claire Dawson never framed what she did as anything remarkable. To her, it was simple. She'd grown up watching her father carry pieces of his service quietly, for decades, and she'd learned early that the kindest thing you can offer someone who has lost so much is not sympathy, but recognition. Not pity, but the simple, steady act of remembering who they still were, underneath everything the world had taken from them. Months later, when Wesley finally left the rehabilitation center, walking, slowly, with a cane, toward a car where his daughter waited with a hand-drawn sign that read "Welcome home, Dad," he stopped at the nurse's station on his way out. "Thank you," he told Claire, "for not treating me like Ghost Actual was gone." Claire smiled, the kind of smile that carries no need for anything in return. He was never gone, she said. Just waiting for someone to say his name. Outside, the city stretched out beneath a soft evening sky, the same skyline Wesley had once watched from behind that window, feeling like the world had moved on without him. Now, walking toward it on his own 2 feet, he understood something he hadn't before. Some things are lost forever. But sometimes, with enough patience and the right person willing to see you clearly, what feels lost is only waiting to be found again, one small, steady step at a time.